Great. Yeah, thanks everyone. So my name is Bryan Hughes, technical evangelist at Microsoft, like Vanessa said. You can find me at Nebrius on Twitter, GitHub, and basically everywhere else. And so today I'm going to talk about basically like privilege in tech and kind of really boiling that down and looking at how that works and kind of what we can do about it. Now, a question you might be asking yourself, though, before I get into that is, why me? Why am I actually here talking to you about this today? You know, especially as someone who is pretty privileged. It's a good question to ask, and I think two key reasons. One is that, well, I'm bisexual and I'm an atheist, and I was also born and raised in multiple places in Texas, which is one of the most conservative places in the entire United States. One of the cities I lived in was actually ranked as the second most conservative city in the entire country. So I'll let you piece together what that was like growing up. It was not pleasant, let's just say. A little more recently, though, I was involved in the Node.js project for about 2 years, where I focused specifically on diversity and inclusivity in the project. I helped to found the Inclusivity Working Group, which was the first group that kind of was working on culture. And then later on, as we kind of restructured some things, I helped to found the Community Committee, which is the current group that is responsible for culture in the project as well as a number of other things. So I like to think that I've learned a few things along the way throughout all this process. Right, so privilege. This is a topic that gets, and a word that gets thrown around quite a bit. And sometimes in genuine ways, sometimes in less genuine ways, shall we say. And I think there's a lot of misconceptions about what it is and what it represents. So I want to spend some time boiling that down and just really talking about what it actually means and the way it manifests itself. And I'm going to do so by making analogies with bug reports, actually, because I think there, as it turns out, are actually quite a few similarities. So this is a problem that we tend to have a lot. Let's say we've got a user. They're using our product, or say we're managing an open source project, and so these users are using our library. So they try and use this thing, and they run into problems. Maybe they get a cryptic error message when they try to log into a site. Maybe the library is crashing on startup. Whatever it is, something got in the way, a bug got in the way of the user being able to use our product. And so, this is bad enough that they go and they file a support issue, or they open an issue on GitHub. And they say, hey, I'm trying to use your thing, and it's not working. So you, as the engineer, you pick up this bug, and you go and you try to reproduce it. So you follow the same steps they did to get to it, and, well, it just works for you, right? You can't reproduce this bug at all. It works on your machine. So mark the bug as closed, can't reproduce, and move on. We've all been there. I have certainly done that a number of times in my engineering career so far. But there's like two sort of simultaneous truths that I think are important to keep in mind. The first one is that it's true. It worked for you. It worked on our machines. And so we are not encountering that bug ourselves. That is absolutely true. The other thing that is also true at the same time is that this user that was using the library or product or whatever did encounter that bug. That bug exists, right? Even if we can't reproduce it, that bug still exists. And the reason this typically happens is because the context of the user, the technical context of the user, is different than the technical context of you. We typically tend to develop on really, new, fast MacBook Pros or something similar to that. We have powerful machines that are new. We also typically have very fast internet access. And a lot of times users don't necessarily have that. They might have a 10-year-old Dell running, Windows 7 that is heavily locked down. And perhaps they have really poor internet speeds or very intermittent internet. There's these differences in context, this technical context, that caused the user to encounter the bug and we didn't. It could have been, say, a race condition in our code. But this race condition was only exposed whenever the performance was slow enough or the network was slow enough. And so it was the bug absolutely exists in the code, regardless of whether or not we encountered it. And the difference is that context. And that's basically what privilege is in a nutshell. It's the case where we exist in a context in the broader world. We live in the country we lived in. We had the parents that we had with their financial situation. We are the gender we are. We are the ethnicity we are. We are the sexual orientation we are, and so on and so forth. So we all exist within these contexts, and there's a lot of bugs in society. Bugs that trace back thousands and thousands of years. And so depending on the context that we live in, we may or may not encounter these bugs in society. And that's what privilege is when we exist in a context that allows us to sidestep this bug, oftentimes without us even realizing that we have done that. And one thing I want to note is there's nothing, there's not a value judgment that I'm placing on the person here. Just like, we don't judge the value of a person based on whether their employer issued them a new MacBook Pro or an old Dell laptop. Like, that doesn't say anything about the person. But that is the context, and that is how they view the world at the same time. So speaking of context, a lot of times, like as engineers, we don't know what the user's context is, at least not fully. The user files this bug. We hopefully will figure out what browser they're running on. If we're really lucky, we'll figure out which browser version and which operating system. And we oftentimes don't know the rest. We don't know what their ISP is. We especially don't know what their networking conditions were at the time of that bug. And sometimes there's even things that could contribute to the bug that we don't even know are things that could contribute to a bug. A really good example, I actually ran into one last week when I was doing some technical work. I was working with Azure File Storage, which is a way of storing files in the cloud. Pretty straightforward. I was following the documentation, and I'm trying to connect to the service to upload some files. And I just couldn't connect. I was trying everything, reading the documentation, following the steps in the Azure documentation, and what should have worked just was not working for me. Turns out it was actually a problem with my ISP. They were blocking port 445 outbound, and I didn't even realize it. Like, I didn't even think about that problem, and I spent about a day on it until I realized what was going on. And so a lot of times, it's not that we don't know the user's context, but we don't know the things that we don't know that are contributing to the bug. And so that's basically what this concept of unconscious bias is. So like in society, there's a lot of things that affect certain groups of people that we don't even think, or we aren't even aware of that is an actual problem. I think perhaps a good example of this is there have been some studies that have shown in meetings, men tend to talk a lot more than women do. And sort of the intuitive reaction that a lot of us men will have is that, oh, women should just speak up more. But there's a whole bunch of other things that actually play into it, a lot of societal dynamics that make that a lot more complicated. And they're things that we as men are just not aware of. We're unconscious to this. And because we're not aware of them, we end up having these biases that come into play. Now, like I said, this is unconscious. We're not doing this on purpose at all, but it is still there. So another thing that we tend to see a lot is that a lot of small bugs can add up to really big frustrations. I think we've all used these services. We log in for the first time, might encounter a small bug along the way. Say we log in, it goes through a redirect flow from auth, and that redirect just like stalls in the middle for some reason. We may not know why, but it sticks. And so we have to go up, manually hit that refresh button, and then it loads and goes along its merry way. That's a bug. It's not a very big one. It's a small detail. It didn't get in the way of us using our product, but it's just kind of annoying. But then once we're in, we start encountering a lot more of these little things. Maybe there's a label that's just kind of cutting off screen a little bit, or maybe there's a button that you have to click on twice before it'll actually activate. Once again, every single one of these bugs is a low priority bug, but when added up together, they add up to a really big, frustrating application. We tend to say that these kind of applications are like, oh, that is so buggy, I hate this app. It's not, we don't approach this as like, oh yeah, there's a bunch of little things, but overall the app is great. No, that's not how our brains actually work. That each of those bugs sort of, they're not even just like a linear additive thing, they kind of multiply against each other. And it becomes a really serious issue, and we end up losing users and things like that. And so that's basically what the concept of microaggressions is. So a microaggression is something where someone will do something to an underprivileged person that just kind of adds up to a little bit. I think a classic example of this is whenever we use the word guys to refer to all developers. Like, viewed in a vacuum, this is not that big of a deal. There's definitely much worse things that a lot of people have to face, such as like wage disparity and discrimination, things like that. So in the grand scheme of things, saying guys isn't that big of a deal when viewed in a vacuum. But the thing is, it doesn't exist in a vacuum. It exists in this broader context. It is one of those little bugs that adds up to a really bad application. It's death by 1,000 paper cuts. And so I think it's really important that we remember that these little things do matter, even if they don't seem like a big deal, because in aggregate, it's just a further reminder that underprivileged people are in fact underprivileged. So So another thing that we tend to see a lot, especially if you've done a lot of open source work, you'll see this, is that users rarely report bugs. This is something I'm actually guilty of myself. I was even chatting with Anna last night about this. We encounter a bug, we get kind of frustrated by it, but we just move along. We could take the time out of our day to open an issue on GitHub or file an issue with the support team, but we usually don't. Because our time is valuable. And so we're always doing these little judgment calls in our head of, should I invest my time to see that someone else fixes the problem by reporting this issue or bug? And the answer is almost always no. Sometimes it's yes, but it's almost always no. So when we look at what is being reported, we have to remember that this is sort of a small representation of much bigger problems. That this is a fraction of the actual bugs users encounter. And we see the same thing when we're talking about culture issues as well. And so, as the way I tend to say it is, like, when we see an underprivileged person who is calling out bad behavior, this is never the first offense, it's the first hill worth dying on. So when I say that, I'm basically saying that someone goes public, writes a blog post, let's say, condemning a company for certain bad behavior. There's oftentimes this instinctual reaction that people working at the company tend to have, and that's to dismiss it. We say, like, okay, well, that person had a problem, but it's because of yada yada, whatever reasons that come up. And most importantly, we'll say, and no one else complained. We say, like, well, okay, so this queer person was complaining about homophobia in a company, but there's all these other queer people, and they didn't say anything, therefore it should be fine. But that's not how it actually works. What was going on with those individuals, with those other queer folks, is that we were doing that analysis in our head and being like, is it worth it to call this out? Is it worth the lost time and productivity, perhaps even loss of respect, loss of job even in some cases that go along with it? And a lot of times the answer is actually no. Like, I certainly see stuff on a pretty regular basis that, it makes me uncomfortable, it makes me feel isolated and singled out as a queer person in a mostly straight world. But I ignore it. I don't call it out. I just kind of go on my way. Because, I'll analyze the situation and realize it's not worth it. And so it's important to realize that when we see someone who is calling something out, it's not just that this is a thing that happened. It's that a thing that happened that was bad enough that it crossed this threshold where it became worth it to call it out. So there's a numbers game. There's an aggregate game going on here. So that's kind of a couple of the core concepts that go into why we have a lot of the disparities that we have in tech and in society as a whole. But what do we do about it? There's a lot of different things we can do, and so I'm going to focus on a very specific aspect, and this is what we can do as individuals. There's entire conversations we had about what large organizations and companies can do, but that's a different talk. And the big thing we can do is to develop empathy. And so empathy is a word that gets thrown around a lot, and it can mean a lot of different things depending on context, but in short, empathy is whenever we can emotionally relate to another person. Technically it is we are feeling what another person is feeling, and it's having that shared experience. Now, in practice, no one will ever feel exactly what another person is feeling, but we get a rough idea. It's about kind of bonding together and creating a shared experience, even though we are different. We exist in different contexts within the world. And so a way that I like to think about it is that we have, the privileges that we have, and every single person has some privilege in some form or fashion. Every single person in this room does have privilege. And once again, like I said earlier, this is not a value judgment on you as an individual. Like, having privilege in and of itself is not a bad thing. It's just a state of being. What matters is what we do with that and how we act on that. That's what really matters. But so everyone has privilege, and it forms this way that we view the world. It colors every interaction we have and everything we see. And so I like to think of it, it's like a lens. It's like looking through a pair of binoculars. We can see one little thing really, really well, but we can't see everything that exists beside it. We're missing most of the world. But we have a lot of insight into this one small part that we can see. And everyone's lens is different, just like everyone's privilege is different, so the way everyone sees the world is different. We are seeing different things. And there actually can be, I think, a lot of power in that. Because if we can really develop our empathy, then this is how we create this lens to someone else. Like, the lens we have is the lens we have. There's nothing we can really do to change that innately. But we can talk to someone else who has a different lens. We can form a relationship with them. We can create a bond with them so that we can together hopefully create a fuller picture of what's going on. We can start to see the world in 360 degrees. And so the thing about empathy, some people do think, or it's often expressed at least, that empathy is just a natural trait we have. Either you have it or you don't. There can be some truth to that, but empathy is also a skill that can be nurtured. It's a skill that can be developed and grown. And I think I'm actually a pretty good example of this. In the past, when I was a lot younger, I really did not have very much empathy, and I wasn't very good at expressing that. But it's something I've been working at, pretty hard over the last, 10 years or so, maybe 7 years, something like that. And I'm by no means perfect, of course, but I've certainly made a lot of progress. And I think this is something we all can do. And there's a lot of different ways that we can really work on training our empathy as well. Way too much to go over into a talk here, but I'm going to give 3 specific tips. Like if there's anything that you can remember about how to kind of work on your empathy, it's these 3 things. The first thing is to listen to and believe marginalized people whenever they say that there is an issue. Like I said, we all have a different lens, and we exist in these different contexts. So whenever someone else is saying that there's a problem, at our company, we have a culture problem with this company, on our team, in this project, our first reaction shouldn't be to say, like, oh, that's not a problem, I'm not experiencing that. I mean, unfortunately, this is what we often do, though. This is how our brains work. This is how human beings are just kind of wired. We always center ourselves in everything we do, because we are the only person where we have a complete understanding of our own experiences. So our first reaction typically is to say, well, I don't have that problem, therefore it's not a problem. But that's not how it works, because we exist in these different contexts, and sometimes we encounter these societal bugs, and sometimes we don't, based on that context. So what we should do instead is to start by recognizing that this person exists in a different context. I may not be experiencing that issue myself, but they are, and so that issue does exist. Just like whenever a user reports a bug, our first reaction should be to believe the user that the bug exists. And then we can do some investigation and figure out how together we can actually try to make things better. So yeah, just try to really work on that innate reaction to say, oh, that's not a problem because I'm not experiencing it, and replace that instead with, oh, that's interesting. And it's like, oh, I see you're experiencing this, or you're telling me that. Tell me more about that, because I don't experience that and I don't quite understand what's going on. So listen and believe first. The next bit of advice I have is to put your ego aside, because really it's not about you as an individual. These bugs that we have in society have existed for thousands of years. There's basically the whole of human history that has led to a lot of the societal issues that we have now. Like, this is not about the individual. This really is about systemic issues. Systemic issues means it's a bug in the system. So, whenever a person of color is calling out white people for racism, as an example, this isn't like we are criticizing, John Smith specifically. This is saying, like, there are these systemic issues that pervade all of society. So when we hear that, try to not feel personally attacked, because it's not a personal attack. Unless you're someone who is, say, on the shitty media men list or something like that. In that case, okay, maybe it is about you. But assuming you're not an asshole like that, which I hope none of you are, then realize that this is much bigger than any individual. So try not to get defensive. Once again, it's human nature to get defensive when someone is criticizing us. But just like whenever we're working on a pull request, like a really good skill as an engineer, when we get critical feedback in a pull request, is not to get angry at the person who gave us that feedback, but instead to go fix our code, and update our pull request. Exact same thing here, really, is we're getting feedback, and then we want to work on this together to improve things. And finally, the last tip I have is to actively work to create inclusive teams. So the thing about creating inclusive and diverse teams is that they don't happen on their own. They take work. It takes work to get different types of people together. We have network effects. We tend to typically know people who are mostly like us. So if we want to bring in people to our team, that are not like us, we have to work a little harder at it. And it's not just about getting people there, it's also making sure that people stay as well. And so, not only do we have to reach out to more people to build these better teams, we have to work on our culture. Just like creating a really good culture around pull requests takes work. We have to get over that defensiveness and instead, work towards, more of a common good. We have to do that when we're creating inclusive teams as well. And that's also another topic that would take me a couple of talks to really go through. But just, I'll say it takes work. There's a lot of resources out there as well where you can figure out how to do that. And we really want to do this because we are so much stronger together than we are apart. There's been a lot of studies that have come out that have shown that when you control for other variables, more diverse teams will always outperform less diverse teams. Like there's a very, very strong correlation there. And so, when we talk about building inclusive and diverse teams, we're not just doing this for the sake of a metric or the sake of some statistics. We want to do this because it makes things better, genuinely better. And when we kind of think about on this, it actually makes a lot of sense, especially when we take this lens view of the world. We're trying to solve problems, and a lot of the problems that we're trying to solve with our products and our open source projects are hard problems. And in order to fix a problem, in order to solve a problem, we first have to understand it. And so we gain a better understanding of any given problem if we can get people who view those problems in different ways. They have these different lenses and different ways of looking at things. So if we get more diverse teams in place, we solve problems faster, and we solve them more completely because we have a better understanding. And I'm not saying this is easy. It's not just you get a more diverse team and then it's unicorns and rainbows. It is hard. Because when we get these more diverse teams, that means our ideas are going to be challenged more, not less. But that's a good thing. Having our ideas be challenged is not easy. It's tough. Once again, we get defensive and reactive. We don't like people saying that we're wrong. But that's actually kind of the point, though, is that when people are saying, well, I don't think this is right, and we're saying the same thing back, we're all challenging each other. We get rid of the bad ideas quickly, and we get to those good ideas a lot faster. We create better products. We create more well-rounded products and things like that. But this is also even more than just a business case. When we create these more diverse teams, we're bringing more people to the table. We're uplifting all of society and not just a single segment in it. There's all these kinds of network effects that we get whenever we're just bringing more people into the fold. And as we've seen, there's oftentimes a lack of talent in engineering. It's hard to find people to fill roles. We need more people. And if we can start reaching out to more people to fill those roles that need to be filled, not only are we getting the people we need, we're able to build better products at the same time. And we're helping out a lot of these individuals too. We're addressing a lot of these systemic issues that we have in society. And so hopefully we can get to a point someday where we actually are working on fixing these bugs in society. And there's a lot of ways to do that, like I said before. If you want to learn more, Mozilla has an inclusion lounge that's going on. There's a panel discussion going on right after this, in fact, and I'm going to be there. And with that, I want to thank you all for listening.